Hello, boys and girls. It's great to come to you again this week to share with you a story and just touch base and see how things are going. Hope you had a good week. Boy, the weather is going to be great. I hope that you're able to get out this weekend, have some fun, play a little bit, and enjoy God's creation. Hey, this weekend is also a wonderful celebration too for the church. We celebrate the Feast of the Body and Blood of Christ. We used to call that Corpus Christi in Latin. This is where we really put some emphasis on how wonderful the gift of the Eucharist is, where God comes to us after the bread and the wine are changed into his body and blood, and we're able to receive him in a very special and very intimate way. You know, I received a great painting this weekend from one of my friends, Rex Proctor, who painted this picture for me. I hope you can see it. And this particular picture, he told me, was taken from a priest that he saw celebrating Mass on TV, I guess. And it's called Longing. And for Rex, this particular picture spoke to him of his longing to receive Jesus again. I thought this was such an incredibly beautiful image, and not only an image, but an idea that was brought through this young man and expressed so beautifully in art. And you probably can't see it from where you are, but there's actually a tear in the eye, which is our longing to receive that intimate connection with Jesus in the Eucharist. And so I pray very soon that we're going to be able to come back and do that. And be able to come together again, at least in some way, as a community. We need one another, we need the Eucharist, and we're going to be able to do that in short order. But in the meantime, we pray for that longing for Christ, as Rex pointed out. So important to know that we need to ultimately connect with God and have God as a huge part of our lives. Which brings us to today's story. On the Feast of the Body and Blood of Christ, what's more appropriate than a story again by Anthony DeStefano? I like his children's stories. I always learn something from them too. Today's is the miracle of the bread and the fish and the boy. The miracle of the bread and the fish and the boy. This is very appropriate for the feast we are going to celebrate. So let's see what this is all about today. Then Jesus went up the mountainside, this is taken from John's Gospel, and sat down with his disciples. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over, and that by those who had eaten. There's a picture for you. So now let's learn a little bit more about how this possibly could have happened. $7.47. The little boy could hardly believe it. He looked down and counted the money again. $7.47. And he had saved it all by himself. It had taken him a long time, but he had managed to do it by helping people in his town carry their packages, by doing extra chores around the house, and by never spending even a penny of the tiny allowance his mother gave him. He had saved the money for one reason, to buy his mother a special present for her birthday. You see, the little boy lived in a fishing village by a lake with only his mother and brothers. He had no father, and his family was very poor. His mother had to work long hours just to put food on the table. But one day the boy had an idea. If he could save enough money, maybe he could buy his family a week's worth of food, and his mother would be able to stay home for a few days and rest her tired feet. So the boy saved his pennies and nickels for months. Finally, on the morning of his mother's birthday, he got up early, just as the sun was rising, and walked to the village market by himself. If only I can buy the food and bring it back home before my mother wakes up, he thought. She will be so surprised. When he got to the food market, he went straight through the door and reached up high to put his money on the counter. Then he boldly said to the shopkeeper, "May I have a week's worth of fish and bread, please?" The shopkeeper was a mean-looking old man. He counted the money slowly and said in a grumpy, gravelly voice, "This is only $7.47. You expect to buy a week's worth of food with this?" "Why not?" asked the boy. "Isn't that enough?" The old man squinted his eyes and growled, "Why, it's hardly any money at all." He turned around and walked to the back of the store. In a few seconds, he returned with 2 fish and 5 small loaves of bread. He plopped them down on the counter in front of the boy. "This is all your money will buy," he said harshly. "But that's not even enough for dinner," the boy protested. "That's all your money will buy," the man grumbled as he turned away from the boy. The boy left the shop feeling heartbroken. He carried the fish and bread in a small basket under his arm, his head hanging low. "Now what am I going to do?" he sobbed. "I worked so hard. I thought I had saved up a treasure. But now I don't have any money and hardly any food. And my mother won't be able to stay home from work even one day. I'm just a failure." But as the boy walked home, he noticed a crowd of people gathering a short distance away. There were old people, young people, rich people, poor people, sick people, handicapped people, thousands of people, and all of them were making their way up the side of a large sloping hill. The boy asked someone what all the commotion was about. "Haven't you heard? The great teacher from Nazareth is here, and he's healing the sick and preaching about God." The boy strained his neck but couldn't see over the heads of the crowd. In fact, the swarm was so thick that he could barely move. So crouching low, he began to go through the people's legs. Because he was so small, he was able to move quickly, and before long, he was close to the edge of the crowd. Kind of cool the way he made his way through all of that. When he finally peeked out from under someone's robe, he saw the great teacher sitting on a rock. The sun was behind him, and he seemed to be carved out of the light. The boy listened to the man speak. He didn't sound like most other adults. His words were so simple, and yet they seemed so wise. Jesus' words are simple and wise, aren't they? When we really listen to them, he really just calls us to do simple things with great love. Just then, one of the men who was with the teacher saw the boy and pulled him up by the sleeves. He brought him over to the teacher and said, "Lord, this boy has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The teacher looked down and said, "Little boy, there are thousands of people here, and they are very hungry. Will you give me your bread and fish so I can feed them?" The boy was confused. "But how can you do that?" he asked. "This food that I bought isn't even enough to give my family. How can it feed this big crowd?" The teacher smiled gently, and spoke to him in a quiet voice. "Little boy, don't you know that with God all things are possible? Don't you know that if you offer everything you have to God, He will multiply the good things you do?" The boy remembered what his mother had taught him about God. He nodded his head and answered, "Yes, I know that God can do anything." Do you know that God can do anything? The teacher stretched out his hand and asked the boy once again for his basket of bread and fish. The boy thought for a second and decided to trust the man, and he gave him all that he had. The man took the food and said a short prayer of thanks. He told the crowd to sit down and laid the basket on the ground. Then he closed his eyes. Suddenly, the boy heard a low, rumbling sound. It started quietly, but it grew louder and louder. Soon it seemed as if the earth was shaking under his feet. Just then the boy noticed that instead of one basket of bread and fish, there were two. Then there were 4, then 8, then 10. In no time at all, there were hundreds of baskets on the ground containing thousands of fish and loaves of bread. The boy couldn't believe his eyes. It was a miracle. The men who were standing near the teacher began to give the food to the people in the crowd. Everyone ate until they were full, and when they were finally done, there were 12 baskets of bread and fish left over. Imagine that. All those people ate and they still had 12 baskets left over. Then the teacher said to the boy, "Remember, without God you can do nothing. But when you pray and ask God for help, He will bless all you do and give you the power to do incredible things." Listen to those words from Jesus again. Remember, without God, you can do nothing. But when you pray and ask God for help, He will bless all that you do and give you the power to do incredible things. You see, God may not always fix all our problems, but He's going to certainly give us the power to do something ourselves. We have more resources to help ourselves and others than we sometimes think. Before going back home, the boy stopped at the lake in his village and thought about what had happened. He didn't have any money, or bread, or fish, or a present for his mother. He should have felt sad, but for some reason he didn't. He had seen a great miracle and was happy to have helped the teacher feed thousands of people. "I only wish I had a small gift from my mom," he thought. So plans changed a little bit for this boy, but let's see how the story ends. But when he got home, an amazing surprise awaited him. His mother rushed over to him in excitement. She pointed to a huge basket of bread and fish in the corner. "Some men came by just now and dropped off this basket," she cried. "It's enough food to last us a whole month. The men told me that they were giving it to you because you helped them today." The boy remembered the leftover baskets of food and smiled. He looked at his mother and said, "It's not for me. It's for you. It's your birthday present. Now you can finally stay home from work and rest for a while." His mother had tears of joy in her eyes. This is the best present anyone has ever given her. She hugged her son tightly. So you see, boys and girls, sometimes there are big problems that we face, that the world face, that our parents face. All of these things seem so huge, and all we have are simple things. Sometimes all we can bring is love. Sometimes all we can bring are prayers. But all of these gifts that God gives us, God can multiply hundreds and thousands and even mega times more to create what needs to be done. All we have to do is do simple things with great love. So this week, Think about God's gift of the Eucharist. Think about ways that you can help others. And think about how you can, every day, do something very simple with great love and be like the boy in today's story, bringing something very small and having God do something very big. God bless you. Miss you. Love you. See you soon. Take care now and have a great weekend.